We know that here in Australia, people are 5 times more likely to address a vision loss than they are a hearing loss, right? So, and it's nice to see, right? You know, there's practical applications to it, you know, things are beautiful and so on. But when it comes to dementia prevention, it's not even in the top 10, right? In this particular study, I did a search of, well, how many times was hearing mentioned versus vision. Hearing was mentioned 96 times, vision was mentioned 6 times, but never on its own as an important factor when considering dementia prevention. Yet people are far more likely to go and have it treated. Okay, so this exact same question has been asked in various research settings, and the general trend is that 83% of people choose their vision, right? And if I think of all the seminars that I've done, that's a pretty robust, I mean, we're dealing with a different group here, but typically it's 83% will choose to keep their vision, 17% will choose to keep their hearing. When asked specifically what it is about your hearing why did you choose hearing, hardly ever does communication ever come up, right? Yeah, it's the sounds of nature, right? You know, lovely to hear those, right? Music, fantastic, right? Very rarely does communication ever come up as an important topic. So coming back to the deafness blindness thing, those that have experienced both deafness and blindness, hands down any day of the week would choose to keep their hearing. Helen Keller, who was the first deaf and blind person to achieve a university degree, this is one of her quotes. And whenever she was asked, because she was asked quite often, what's worse, losing your hearing or losing your eyesight, she'd always just say, look, deafness is so much worse because blindness separates us from things, deafness separates us from people. When hearing starts to decline, a lot of the richness in communication is it's just too hard. Throwaway lines, right? Punchlines of a joke, even intimate communication. It's just not effective if you've got to repeat yourself, right? So over time, particularly in marital relationships, there's quite a lot of pain there. On both sides, not just the person that's got the hearing loss, really anyone that wants to have a quality relationship with someone that's got a hearing loss, they are directly impacted as well, right? So, but there's a strong tendency to underreport the issue, and it's typically a bigger problem for them than they're willing to admit straight off the bat. So I'm going to talk a bit more about social isolation now. So again, we saw one of the more devastating, one of the most devastating impacts of the COVID-19 crisis was this physical distancing separation that was kind of imposed on us, right? Very hard on people. But I'm going to talk about a couple of studies that relate to happiness. The first study that I'm going to talk about is one that you may be aware of. It has been on the media, and there's been a couple of TV programs on this. It's the Harvard Happiness Study, and it's been going for 80 years now. And it's quite remarkable that they've been able to do this study over an 80-year period. Basically, what they did was they tracked the lives of a bunch of people over an 80-year period, trying to address the question or get a good understanding about, well, what is it that makes a happy life? Is it the family you were born into, is that the how much money you earn, the kind of job you have, all the stuff you've got. What is it that makes a happy life? So what the researchers have found is that, well, the least happy people are the socially socially isolated and the lonely, right? They are more likely to be depressed, didn't live as long, have physically smaller brains. Not a good situation. The happiest people were those with the highest quality of relationships, right? So they were happy as a function of the quality of the relationships in their lives. Family relationships important, also that of close friends, but a key criteria is the quality of the relationships in your life. If we think about an essential ingredient that needs to be there for a relationship to be of high quality, anyone like to chip in there? Hi there. 100%, right? Communication. So, and I think you'd all agree that that's like a really important factor. There's others, but communication, when it breaks down, relationships tend to break down. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that because hearing loss as a health condition is rather unique in that it's not just the person that has the health condition that's affected by it. In fact, more often than not, it's other people that are more concerned about the hearing loss than the person that actually has it, right? So if I've got a hearing loss and I'm wanting to have a meaningful conversation with you, but I'm asking you to repeat and you're having to simplify things and so on, well, you've then got a problem as well, right? At the University of Queensland, where I did my master's degree in audiology, a year after I graduated, they did this interesting study where they got 100 couples, 100 spouses, right? So the criteria to be in this study is that one person in the relationship needed to have a hearing loss, the other person normal hearing. And they ran both groups through a series of tests, and one was a standardized disability test. And they found that the normal hearing spouses were found, 90% were found to have some degree of what they call third-party disability in communication. So they were classified as having a disability, although their hearing's completely fine, right? Their disability was because of their partner's hearing loss, right? And for 18% of these people, it was significant. It was like serious, right? So there's kind of far-reaching consequences, and it's usually other people that notice it first, and it's usually there's exceptions, but on average, it's other people that are more concerned and affected by it than the people that actually have it themselves. The second study that I'm going to talk about relates to the blue zone studies. So you might have heard of the blue zones. The blue zones, they're parts of the world where people are more likely to live to be over 100 years of age. And they're of supreme interest to the medical community, universities, public health officials, society at large, because what is it these people are doing to be living to these ripe old ages over 100 years of age? So they're under a microscope, and there's various trends that are across the blue zones. So there's blue zones in Japan, there's some in the Mediterranean and so on. And there's similarities between them from a lifestyle perspective, diet and so on. They found an interesting trend in one particular blue zone in Sardinia, which is an island off Italy. And in this particular blue zone in Sardinia, they found that both men and women were equally likely to live to be over 100 years of age, which is that trend didn't occur in the other blue zone countries, and it's the in the Western world, we know that women are on average likely to outlive men by about 7 years. So that clear age difference, which hasn't really been all that well understood. So they looked at what's happening with these guys. Is it like a genetic thing? Well, no, because when these guys travelled, their life expectancy just fell into line with everyone else, or when they moved abroad. But what they found was that they couldn't see any difference between the way in which men and women in these blue zones prioritise relationships, right? So when we do, if we look at huge multivariate data on the differences between men and women, and there are differences from a psychological point of view that are well proven. Men, on average, there's exceptions, men have a proclivity to things, whereas women have a proclivity to people, right? There's exceptions, but these are robust trends, right? So in this particular blue zone, the guys were as oriented to people as the women were, and as a result, that was the only core difference that the researchers could find, and as a result, they lived a longer life, right? And because the researchers wanted to understand these trends, they interviewed these guys, and they really wanted to know, okay, well, are they doing it on purpose? Do these guys know that there's such richness there, in prioritizing relationships in that way? But they came to the distinct impression that these guys weren't doing this on purpose, right? It's what they knew. It was their culture. It's how they grew up. You put your family first. You make time for your mates, and so on. It wasn't an intentional thing, and the researchers got a distinct sense that these guys kind of took it all for granted, right? And I think there's a couple of lessons there. For me, one is that I think that our ability to communicate well, it's hard to imagine life without it, right? And I think because it's always there, kind of like a fish in water, we can't. It's hard for us to get our head around what life would be like when it kind of goes away, right? And I think it tends to mean that we give it low priority. As a health condition, and this is a generous estimate, that we have a treatment rate for hearing loss here in Australia, an effective treatment rate, meaning people actually use the treatment, of around 17%. I think that's an overestimate. But at 17%, I can't find another health condition with such an appallingly low treatment rate, right? And I think part of it is because we just kind of tend to take things, communication in particular, for granted. Most commonly, people with hearing loss, and even in the early stages of hearing loss, they find it difficult to hear in background noise in groups. So social situations start to become more of a challenge for them, and I've got to say, it's the number one complaint that we get in the clinic is hearing in background noise in groups. I can hear, often my patients can hear one-on-one okay. As soon as they get out into background noise, that's where the problems start. So what starts to occur is people that are having difficulty hearing in those social situations start to feel like they're left out of the conversation, right? So it can be isolating. It can start to be a bit embarrassing. If you laughed at something that wasn't actually a joke, or you didn't know it was a joke, right? It can be potentially embarrassing. So what often happens, and frequently my patients report that they started to subconsciously do this is there starts to be an avoidance of those social situations, right? Because of the embarrassment, frustration, sense of being left out, which tends to result in people doing less of the things that they'd like to do. What's most concerned is that social contact is starting to become reduced. And I think it was with COVID-19, it really did shine a light on, well, what are the consequences of social isolation? And I think that there's a broader awareness of just how important it is. And there's acres of research that points to very clear links between untreated hearing loss and social isolation. What the research tells us about social isolation is that people that are socially isolated, they're far more likely to be depressed, they're far more likely to die at a younger age, so the life expectancy is less. And when we measure it, they have smaller brains, right? So there's quite far-reaching consequences to being socially isolated. And we're not just talking about parties and cocktails and bars and things like that. It can actually be, having a hearing loss that's untreated can actually be somewhat isolating on the domestic front, right? It's not uncommon for my patients to have different TV listening rooms, right? Because, you know, the volumes just can get to a point where they're not compatible. The tricky kind of admission by a lot of my patients is that they've become the butt of family jokes, you know, and so it can be somewhat isolating on the domestic front for the person with hearing loss, and also anyone that wants to interact with them too, because it's a unique thing about having a hearing loss is that it doesn't just affect the person that has it, it affects everyone else that wants to have a meaningful interaction. At the University of Queensland, where I did my master's degree, about a year after I graduated, there was a study done on 100 spouses, and the criteria to be in this study is that one person in the relationship needed to have a hearing loss, the other person needed to have normal hearing. What they found, they studied both groups, and in the group that had normal hearing, they actually found that around 90% of those normal hearing people had a clinical disability in relation to communication because of their partner's hearing loss, right? And around 18% it was considered to be quite severe, right? And this is for a health condition that they don't personally have, right? So I think that, I mean, we know that there's a strong tendency for people to avoid addressing their hearing problem. I think there's a bigger story in the broader impacts on the relationships and particularly family relationships of those with hearing impairment and the impact that it has on them. There's really three main categories that are considered to be significant when we're seeing these links between untreated hearing loss and dementia, and they are brain overload, so the strain, the constant strain that hearing loss puts on the brain, social isolation, we're going to delve into that again shortly, and cerebral atrophy, which is a fancy word or fancy term for brain shrinkage. So we're going to focus a little bit on brain overload now, and I'm going to give you just a quick little exercise. If you can try to read what's up on the screen there. We've got a few bits missing, see if you can put that together. And what you're getting with this particular slide is you're getting the benefit of the consonants, okay? All right. So you could probably put most of it together. Right? Now try it with untreated hearing loss. So you can see the vowels, they don't really carry, they don't generally carry much meaning. Okay, so for someone with that doesn't have the benefit of the consonants, they're having to fill in the gaps to follow conversation, right? And that's a 24/7 thing. We can't turn our hearing off. It's on. It works when we sleep. Even when we put earmuffs on, it only reduces our hearing by about 25%. It's really very difficult to imagine what life would be like when you've lost your hearing completely. Really easy to imagine what life would be like if you lost your vision completely, right? Just close your eyes, you know. But I think that particularly when it comes to communication, I think it's a real challenge to get our heads around just what life would be like when that's actually been taken away. And that's the actual sentence there, okay, that you may have guessed with the consonants. And it's a 24/7 thing. So having a hearing loss, it's there all the time. It's putting an ongoing strain on our brain, and there's acres of research on this. When we look at brainwave patterns, people with hearing loss or untreated hearing loss versus those that treat it, vastly different results.
If you're interested in learning more about hearing and brain health, internationally recognised audiologist Andrew Campbell has written a comprehensive book on the subject, Hearing the Mind Robber. You can download the first chapter immediately by clicking the free chapter link below. You'll have the option to order your own complimentary hard copy as well. We only ask that you cover the cost of shipping. If you're interested in a quick assessment of your hearing ability, we've developed an online test that you can access by clicking the online test link below. Indeed, if you'd like to make a booking for a consultation with a qualified audiologist, please click the Make an Appointment link below and a customer service representative will get back to you shortly.